Hi, welcome along. I am Bear Gardener. I am a cards streamer and player. You can find me on all the social media that are on your screen now. Twitch, here on YouTube. This is part of my beginners series of decks to help newer players, in which I'm particularly exploring decks that I recommend for players who are newer to the game. I've done a previous video on the Japan aggro starter deck, which I recommend. This one is going to be on a US mid-range or frontline deck. I'm going to start with the same tips that I always give, which is when you first start playing, the most important thing that you're going to want to do is finish all of the starter campaigns, unlocking the decks there. Then you're going to want to get all of your nations to level 12. At level 12, each of your nations unlocks a second deck, which increases your card pool. Once you've done that, that's when I recommend you to be ready to start thinking about playing actual battles against other players, rather than training against the AI. Make sure you do your missions every day. It's always easier to knock those out against the AI than it is against other players, unless you're particularly confident. The rest of it, we're going to talk about the deck. We will look at it. These decks, these starter decks that I recommend, require 0 crafting. So as soon as you've unlocked your nations at level 12, this deck is available. You can just have this there. So the code for the deck will be in the link below. That code you will find, you can copy it. If you then create a new deck, it will recognize that you have a code on your clipboard. It will say, do you want to import it? Click yes, you will get this deck. You will have the cards for this deck. I believe this deck is still in the correct state. If not, the link will be. It will give you a good, solid, basic frontline deck. So, what's a frontline deck? So, frontline distinguishes itself from other decks or mid-range primarily because we concentrate, instead of having lots and lots of very cheap units, the majority of what we want to do in this deck, you'll see, is the middle cost. So we call this deck frontline because we want to occupy the front line. That's how we're going to win. We're going to keep presence on the front line, and in doing so, we're going to keep pressure on our opponent. So we want units that will allow us to either take the front line and hold it, or allow us to gain benefit from holding the front line. Early on, we've got a bit of a mixed bag in this deck. Like all these decks, it will play very well at the start, but eventually will upgrade it. Cards that I'll pick out. M4 Greyhound. This is an incredible card for a frontline deck because it is a 1 cost, 1 op cost blitz unit, which means on turn 2 you can get it into the front line. Now, it's only 1 attack, but 3 defense at that turn is an awkward number to remove without having to use 2 units to do so, which might result in your opponent losing 2 cards, or at the very least having to activate 2 cards to remove it and slowing them down, which is what we want to do. Similarly, Red Devils. This is an incredible card because not only does it do exactly what the Greyhound does, it also charges your opponent 1 extra credit every time they target for the pleasure. These are cards that we'll be using for a while. We also have 463rd Infantry Battalion. This is just there because we need cards at the moment. These are the cards that will disappear eventually. 17th Infantry. It's got a deployment effect, +1/+1 to another friendly unit. Can be really good. Obviously, it means don't deploy it. It can't target itself. Panzer 35T. I've covered this. I will cover this in pretty much every video I do that involves Germany. This is one of the strongest cards in the game. It is a 2/2 tank which deploys at 2 cost. Now, it technically has an operation cost of 1 and blitz, but it reduces that operation cost by 1 if you control an infantry, and you should always look to control 1 when you deploy this, because then it is a 2/2 0 op cost blitz, which means on the turn that you play it, you can drop it on the board, move forward, and attack something. It's incredible. You'll be using it a lot. We're 5th Infantry. This gets +1/+1 when it moves into the front line, which is something we're going to be doing, which turns it into a 3/4. It'll be around with us for a while. Eventually it will get replaced. 22nd Infantry is one of the other types of cards I talked about. This is a card that benefits from us being in the front line. As long as we control the front line, at the end of our turn, we draw a card. Card draw is really important. It gets us to the cards that we want in the game. 980 Volks Grenadier. This is just here as a big chunky body. It's a 3/6, which is hard to deal with, that will just hang around for a while until we replace it with something we're more happy with. 30th Regiment falls into a very similar category. It is about default value for a 3-cost, 1-op cost unit, in that it's just a flat 4/4. Doesn't have blitz, doesn't do anything infantry, it's just basic infantry. 1st Marines is a different kind because it has 1 less attack, despite having the same cost and op cost. However, it has blitz, which means it can move into the front line. It's right on turn 4. Gives your HQ rather smokescreen, which means your HQ can't be targeted by units. It's very limited. It's useful, especially if your opponent is Britain and has lots of bombers or air units and is trying to target your HQ, but ultimately it will leave us eventually. M18 Hellcat, on the other hand, isn't going anywhere, and in fact eventually we will have 2 of these if we possibly can. This is an amazing value unit. It is a 3-cost blitz unit with 1 op cost. It's a 4/2, however it deals double damage against tank, so when your opponent drops that big heavy tank, whether it's as a guard or a threat, this can do 8 damage to it. This will be with us all the way through our career. It's a great card. Speaking of great cards, M16 Half Track. A couple of these will also be with us all the way through our career. Yes, it's only a 2/2. No, it doesn't have blitz. However, the deployment effect is incredible. An enemy air or infantry unit must retreat. Now, if that unit is in the front line, it moves to the support line, which often is what we'll want to use it for, to make sure we maintain the front line. However, if that unit is in the support line, it goes back to your opponent's hand. If your opponent plays a very expensive infantry unit or air unit, especially big bombers, you can pop it back to hand and make them have to play it again. Now, obviously, be cautious of deployment effects, because if it has a powerful deployment effect, your opponent will get to trigger it again when they replay the card. But generally speaking, this can be an incredible tempo card. It can really slow your opponent down, giving you time to continue establishing on the front line. Beyond that, it's just a 2/2 body, which doesn't do anything special. However, it's a tool, and this is a toolbox deck. Mid-range decks generally are toolboxes. We have ways to fix most stuff, and then we find a way to finish the game once we have the advantage. Finishing the game leads us neatly onto Blitzkrieg, which will also be with us, and eventually we'll have 2 of. Friendly units in the front line gain +3 attack and operate for 1 less until the end of turn. Played at the right time, this wins games. End of. If you've got 4 units in the front line and they are all active, which means they have to still be able to move or attack, it's very important not to play this when you don't have it. It doesn't refresh their ability to move or attack, it just reduces the cost to do it. If you do that, though, that's an extra 12 damage on top of what you're already doing, which with our deck could be as much as 8 or 9. It can be lethal, which is to say your opponent's entire health total in a turn. This is one of the most key cards to it. With Death from Above in for the minute, this won't stay forever because it's random, and I personally don't like random. It is a 4-cost, destroy a random enemy unit. If the enemy only has 1 unit and it's incredibly dangerous, this is a brilliant card. If the enemy has 3 units, 1 of them is incredibly dangerous and 2 of them are indifferent, or worse yet, 1/1 cards that you don't care about, this is a terrible card, because you have a higher chance of not rolling the unit you want to destroy. On the other hand, not only will the M4 Sherman be with us for our entire career, we will get another one and we will have 4 of them in our deck. This card is incredible, from beginning to end. It gives you a 4/4 body. Granted, it's 2 op cost, but by the time you're actually using it to drive forward, you'll have the credits. But the key is, if you have a US unit, critically US, your allies don't count, in the front line you get to draw 2 cards. Card draw, crucial in this game. M4 Sherman's going to be with us all the way through our career. It's incredible value. Card that isn't going to be with this deck, but is still a good card all the way through its career, is the Trop. So the 109E7 Trop is a 4-cost, 2 op cost fighter. that gains +1/+1 on deployment if you control a tank, or +3/+3 if you control, a tank or an infantry, or +3/+3 if you control both. This could be a 6/6 aircraft, which can be good value. It's not going to stay with us. There are other decks in which this is much, much better. It is a good card, which is what will be with us for a while, but it will eventually be replaced by better frontline tools. By definition, this isn't a frontline tool. It wants to sit on the support line and do its job. M4A1, kind of similarly. It's a nice card, it's a nice special. We won't be crafting another one, we won't be keeping it. It's okay, but it's not incredible. We can do it. Similarly, it's a good card, has good value early on, especially climbing an early ladder. Being able to give your units an HQ +3 defense and draw a card is good value. Eventually there are better cards to go for. Rolling on down the list, we've got List Regiment. List Regiment won't be with us for that long. If you control the front line, enemy unit must retreat. It's good value, 5/6, 5 cost. It's about on curve, but ultimately it won't stay with us. It's not powerful enough. 2nd California will be with us for a while. Early on in the game, it's incredibly powerful. Later in the game, much less so. But especially by the time you get close to or in Field Marshal, this card becomes a lot less powerful, because opponents will have access to better removal tools. And this is a high value target for removal, because it is incredible. It is a guaranteed 5 damage to 3 targets unless your opponent can remove it. Worth being aware of. So early on powerful, eventually not so much. F190, this is in here because it's card draw. Gives us something to do with 6 credits and gets us card draw and puts an aircraft on the board. Again, very much like the Trop, it will go because we don't really want to worry about aircraft. Strategic Bombing, this isn't going anywhere. This is a great card. 3 damage to all targets in the enemy support line, and the enemy loses a credit slot. This is incredible. If you can keep the front line, force your enemy to be putting stuff on to try and take the front line, and then fire this card off and remove most, if not all, of their things in the support line. It's incredibly powerful. B-25 Mitchell is its filler at the moment. It's a bomber, which is nice because it can ignore guard and target things, but it is a 6 cost unit. It also deals 3 damage to a random enemy on deployment. You know how much I like random from earlier on. And it's 3 op cost for 4 damage. It's not amazing, but it'll hang around for a while. So, I've said a lot about it'll hang around for a while. Where do we go from a while? So, also, in the links in the doobly-doo, you will find this. A link to import this deck. Now, critically, just like I have here, you can import a deck that you do not have the cards for, and I recommend you do, because you can come back to it and use it to see what you want to craft when you get your wild cards, which are up in the top. You will gain wild cards that allow you to craft cards of different nations. I'll do a proper video on crafting at some point. This is the frontline deck that I regularly run at the upper end of the game. Now, I am not a top competitive player, but I've placed top 60. I'm comfortable around good players and playing against good players. This deck is always competitive. It isn't always going to win because it's mid-range for a reason, but it is always competitive because it's awkward. The final deck has 2 copies of Red Devils because, as I said before, Red Devils is amazing. Greyhound, for the same reason. We have 3 of them. We don't actually have 4 because we didn't quite have enough room. We have 4. We have a full set eventually of 164th Infantry, which is a 1 cost, 0 operation cost blitz unit, which when it dies gives +1/+1 to a random friendly unit. This can be very powerful. First of all, you can obviously deploy it, attack something, give a bonus to something else, and when it's destroyed, get it, which is its primary use. But if you have nothing else in hand and you're against a high aggro deck, sacrificing one of these without gaining the +1/+1 because you don't have another friendly unit to slow someone down from getting to the front line before you on turn 1 is value. Do not be afraid to sacrifice these and lose the bonus. It is worth it to let you get the front line, because without the front line, this deck is largely strangleholded and dead in the water. 99th Infantry, Deployment. If you control the front line, give another friendly unit +2/+2. Speaks for itself. It's incredible value, critical card, very effective. It's a special. We've got a few of them in here. Elite. We'll talk about elites properly in a minute, but the 507th PII is good. I'm going to skip over the elites and come back to them at the end, because I'll talk about crafting priority for those, because they are the hardest cards to get in the game. Panzer 35T. This is a top card, and if you're running both of these decks, there are some cards from Germany, because Germany is the ally for both of these, that you will see are crossovers, and that's good value for you. It means that you can see the ability to run both of these decks and advance both of your nation levels and have good value. The 35T crosses over between both. This is, as I said in the original list, it's an incredible card. We'll have 3 of them. 22nd Infantry, literally the same logic. It's a great special that we'll take 2 of all day long. M10A1. This is a new card which we will craft on our way up. It is from the latest expansion to the game. It is a 3 cost, 1 op cost, 4/2 without blitz. So on the face of it, it's an okay tank. It's sort of like a less good Hellcat. However, it has suppress. Now what suppress does is removes all keywords abilities, have their attacks, max defenses and op costs reset to their normal point. Basically debuffs a card. So if your opponent has a 2/2 1 op cost card that they have buffed to be a 10/10/0 op cost card, you deploy this, target that unit, and it goes back to being a 2/2 for the rest of ever. It's just gone. This effect is incredibly powerful and very good as a toolbox, again, for us being able to deal with enemy threats. We'll definitely be running these. We then skip over the elite. We'll come back to Skytrain in a minute. Blitzkrieg, 2 of, finishing card, as I talked about previously, just good value. Hellcat, same deal. I'm only running 1 at the minute. You could argue for running 2. Half track, I'm running 2. It's the balance between half track, Hellcat, and the M10A1 is something that lots of people are playing with at higher levels as to what the ideal balance between those 3 cards is. I have a 7 Schutzen in here. Eventually it will probably turn into another Hellcat, but it's in here to remind you of another really good card for this deck. It has Blitz, it has good stats. When it attacks and destroys a unit, it becomes a veteran, which turns it into a 5/5, but also deals 3 damage to the enemy HQ. There's debate as to how valuable this is in Frontline. I like it. I think on balance I'd rather have Hellcats or similar, but it's a card to be worthy of note, and if you pick it up out of a pack, you can definitely run it in this deck, which is one of the reasons I have 1 of them in here, to remind me, if nothing else, to tell you, if you have this, you can put it in this deck, no problem at all. It will give you value. 5th Rangers, critical card to this deck. It's actually a card that is probably most associated with the US Frontline archetype. It is a 4 cost, 4 operation cost, 4/4. On the face of it, this is a terrible card. It really is awful. It has no good value at all. It has Blitz, but you'd need 8 credits to Blitz with it, and then you've got 4/4 body. It's awful. However, the deployment effect turns this into a Swiss Army knife, or I suppose a US Army knife. Choose 1. This unit has 0 operation cost, or gets +4/+4. So this is either a 4 cost, 4/4, 0 operation cost Blitz, or a 4 cost, 8/8, 4 operation cost Blitz unit. Both of these are good. 9 times out of 10, I would say, you're going to be choosing the first one because you want the early tempo. But do not sleep on the value that at turn 9, because you need 9 credits to get the value out of it, and afterwards, being able to put down and move forward an 8/8 body has for you. There's a key card to the deck. Speaking of key cards, 20 Panzer Grenadier. I will talk about this endlessly. It is a key card in lots of decks. This card is pure value. On the face of it, 3/4, 4 cost, 1 op cost, fairly average. Has blitz, kind of nice. However, on deployment, you add Panzer 35T, we know how much we love this, to your hand, and a combined arms. The time to play this card is turn 8. On turn 8, or at least when you have 8 credits, more specifically, you play Panzer Grenadier, 20 Panzer Grenadier for 4. You advance it to the front line for 1 more, spending 5. You then play the Panzer 35T onto the board for 2, reducing its operation cost to 0 because you have an infantry unit, you just played the Panzer Grenadiers. Move it to the front line, drop the final credit on combined arms, which gives the Panzer +1/+1 for each unit type you control. 5 unit types in the game, you are guaranteed to have 2 of them on the board when you play this. So it's at minimum +2/+2, making it a 4/4 with 0 op cost blitz, and it's a tank, which means it can both move forward and attack on the turn it's deployed. This card is incredible, it is critical, and playing it at the right time can win or lose you games. Include 2 of them, such as life. Speaking of max, includes the M4 Sherman, as we discussed before. Get 4 of them, put them in your deck, profit. They just card draw, 4/4 body, it's such good value. Ironically, many of us refer to the 20 Panzer Grenadier as the German Sherman. It is a similar level of incredible value because it is effectively getting 2 cards. In this case, it creates them rather than drawing them, but they're 2 specific cards, and on turn 8 you can play the whole combo together. Then I have Stars and Stripes in here. 1 damage to each unit in the enemy support line for each unit there. So if your enemy has a full support line with 4 units and their HQ, each of those 4 units will take 4 damage. This is just straight ways to clear enemy support line, just like strategic bombing. These are good ways of, if you've compressed your enemy into the support line, which you should do because you're holding the front line, this lets you batter down any attempt they have to push back. I don't include more than 1 of Stars and Stripes because I don't think there's any need. Right, strategic bombing is an elite, so obviously we're going to talk about elite. Strategic bombing you get for free. This is in your starter decks and it'll be with you the whole way through this. It's good value. Other elites. Now, very specifically, there are lots of elites to talk about in the game. I have made sure that I restrict myself to 4 elites in these final lists at maximum because I don't want to. There are decks, very powerful high-end decks that run 6 or even 8 elite cards. They're very hard to get to until you've built your collection. When you're trying to get up to Field Marshal and just make sure that every season you're getting Field Marshal and getting the free gold elite card and all of the benefits that come with it, you want to focus on very specific cards that will get you there. So we're going to run down the list of elites that I recommend crafting when you get them for this. Now, crafting these, you will unlock elite wild cards for the nations at level 49 for each nation, level 99 and I think level 149 and so on and so forth. You will regularly unlock elite cards as you play up. You can also get some through crate. There is another video coming on crate. Because it's a whole different thing about building your collection. So, hopping on to the elites that I recommend crafting. So I'm actually going to go 327th Pathfinders because this is the first elite I recommend you craft for this archetype. Because this card is incredibly powerful. It is what I refer to and what other players refer to as a must-answer card. Once it's on the board and triggers its effect, if you do not remove it somehow, it can completely destroy your gameplay. Why is that? Because you deploy it, you target an enemy unit dealing 2 damage, always target an enemy unit that has 1 or 2 health. There is no point playing this card otherwise. At which point, 327th Pathfinders becomes a veteran. At veteran, 327th Pathfinder looks terrible. It gains nothing. Except Blitz. Why does that matter? It doesn't. You don't even want it in the front line. However, what does matter is the card text. At the start of your turn, a random enemy unit retreats. One random enemy will move back one, either from the front line into the support line or from the support line back into hand. This can ruin your opponent's day, especially if you're controlling the front line, because it is milling their cards. It is killing their credit economy, because every turn they're having to replay a card until they can remove this card. This card is amazing. It doesn't have smokescreen. I've heard people ask why it doesn't have something like smokescreen, because it would be far too powerful. This card is game-changing if you play it well. I've won a lot of games on this. Topcraft. Going down. Let's go to the card I would recommend crafting next, which is the 507th PIR. Parachute Infantry Regiment, for those who are nerds about warfare. This card drops for 2, has smokescreen, and at the end of your turn gives a random friendly infantry unit +2 attack. The worst thing that happens with this, and it does happen, is it can be selfish. It can buff itself, and with only a 3 defense, it's not the perfect body for it, but it's still not terrible, and it's good value. It's a bit random, but it's strong. Speaking of random but strong, C-47 Skytrain, the 4th elite from this, and I would say I would craft it after the PIR, but you could argue both ways. I don't think you would lose either way. They're both really good. C-47 Skytrain is a 0-4 fighter that costs you 3 and has a knock cost of 2, not that you'd ever be attacking with it. What is amazing about it, though, is at the end of your turn, you add a random 1-cost US infantry unit to your support line. You can get some really good units out of this, but in particular, this unit can spawn Red Devils. You've already heard me talk about how powerful this card is for a 1-cost unit. It can spawn some other units that are useful. You could get 164th. If we actually we can narrow the search. We go to US Infantry 1-cost, and we open it up. There are, in the entire game, presently, exactly 7 cards this can spawn. You could spawn Red Devils, which is good. You could spawn 164th, which is not bad. You could spawn the 593rd Jasko, which reduces damage dealt to your HQ by 1. It's an incredibly good card. Arguably, one of the worst things you can get out of this is 506th Airborne, because this is the vanilla of 1-cost infantry. It is a 1-cost, 1-op cost, 2-2 infantry. It is exactly on curve. Has no edge to it. 463rd Battalion, it's not terrible. Can deal effectively 1 damage to a target and 1 damage to another unit. And of course, Engineers, adjacent units +1 attack, not terrible. Any of these units are good, but the fact that you have effectively 2 out of 7 times you can get either Red Devils or Jasko makes Skytrain very powerful, which is why there is an argument that you might want to craft Skytrain first, you might want to craft PII first. It depends on your playstyle. More aggressive players probably want to craft PIR first, but I like either. They're good cards. So that gives you the final deck that you aim for. As I will regularly say, I recommend, so you'll see I have the original deck. This you won't have, because I only have the original deck here for the purposes of this video so that I can describe it to you. I have here the deck as I'm currently playing it. If you go and look at my Japan aggro deck video, which I hugely recommend you do, so that then you can try both of these and see which style suits you best, I'll explain what's going on Tuesdays, 5:30 UK time in the evening. You can come find me. I stream twice a week. On a Saturday at 5:30, I stream my regular stream playing different decks and talking to people. On Tuesdays, I stream a new player experience stream at the moment, in which I have started a completely new account with some restrictions. to myself so that I can show the new player experience. I wanted to make sure that I didn't just make a video and go, hey, do this, it definitely works. I'm proving the point that it works. You can come watch me doing it. The videos on demand are here on YouTube too. So if you can't make the stream, you can come do that. If you can make the stream on Twitch, highly recommend you come and do it. We have a great community. I'm fortunate enough that some very, very good players who are friends of mine and acquaintances of mine in the game come along and watch it and are really good about answering questions and giving advice. Anyway, so this is the deck as I'm playing it now, but I also keep the final deck. This is so that I can go back and reference it, hop into it and go, if I've got a card to spend, where do I want to spend it? And I can spend it in here, because I can go, well, I've got a special card, and looking at this, like, I would definitely, if I had a special card, I would really be thinking about Panzergrenadier. It's a very strong card. And I could create it by just clicking on create if I wanted to. This is a way that I recommend newer players do things. You'll notice I've also deleted all the starter decks. You don't have to. I recommend keeping them for doing your daily missions. I tidied them up because I throw together my own decks for that sort of thing. This is what I consider to be a good structure on how to build up this deck. A friend of mine, Nero, I will link his video below in the comments, has done an excellent video on credit management and playstyle with a Frontline deck. I recommend you go watch that, because I'm not going to remake it. Other content creators have already made it. Petriachor, another good friend, has done a great video on Frontline decks too. I'll link that below too, another thing to look at. Also check out my Japan aggro deck information. That'll be linked below as well. Maybe watch some of the streams on demand or come join us. If you've got questions, you can pop them in the comments. You can hop on stream if you're available when I'm streaming on Twitch and ask questions, as I've got a really friendly community. Also, please reach out to me on social media. All of my socials are right here on screen. My DMs are open. Come find me. I will try and answer your questions as best I can. I like to help people. So, thanks for watching. I hope it's useful. And I will catch you in the next video.